Welcome to our channel TechZen. With the final launch of the Saturn V rocket that had taken the Apollo astronauts to the moon in 1973, the space age reached its pinnacle in terms of scale and spectacle. The Saturn V was taller than the Statue of Liberty and could carry 140 tons into orbit. As ceiling tiles fell around him during the inaugural flight in 1967, Walter Cronkite, an American newsman reporting far from the pad, exclaimed, "My God, our building's shaking here." Nothing more powerful has been sent into orbit in the last half-century. SpaceX, a rocketry company established by Elon Musk and based near Boca Chica, a Texan town a few miles from the Mexican border, is developing a machine that it believes will alter that. Starship, made of dazzling stainless steel and stands 10 meters taller than the Saturn V, appears like something out of a 1950s pulp science fiction magazine cover. With a cargo of up to 150 tons, 5 Starship missions could transport more goods into space than the rest of the world achieved with 135 rocket launches in 2021. Its top stage has more pressurized volume than the International Space Station, which took a decade to build, dozens of missions, and maybe $100 billion. However, size isn't the only factor to consider. The only piece of the 2,800 tons of gear that returned from a Saturn V mission to carry men to the moon was a small 5-ton capsule with 3 men inside. Each new task necessitated the launch of a fresh Saturn V. The concept behind Starship is that all of the gear will return, the enormous booster stage will return very soon, and the second orbital stage will return after completing whatever mission it was sent on. Mr. Musk restated his motives for starting SpaceX during a press event on February 10th to show off a constructed rocket. To purchase mankind an insurance policy against existential dangers by establishing a colony on Mars. The Starship is built to transport 1 million tons of supplies he estimates are required for the job, roughly 100 times the mass of any spacecraft flown since the dawn of the space age. It is planned to be not just the largest but also the cheapest rocket ever created to that goal. Existing rockets cost tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to launch. In today's money, the Saturn V may have cost over $1 billion. Despite the Starship's massive size, SpaceX wants to keep the cost down to the millions. If they ever arrive, colonies on Mars will be a long way off. However, Starship's unparalleled mix of size and economy might upend the economics of space travel closer to Earth as well. The limits on an industry that has become accustomed to shaving grams of bulk and packing sophisticated cargoes into small cargo bays will be abolished. Some scientists are already planning lavish space trips to use the rocket's enormous capacity. It will be used by NASA to land astronauts on the moon. It is also being considered by the American military. Starship is also critical to the future of SpaceX, which was reportedly valued at more than $100 billion. However, the rocket must first take to the air. A succession of Starship's top stage, dubbed Starship in Isolation, has resulted in crash landings and explosions. On May 5th of last year, an upper stage sailed 10 kilometers into the air before landing safely back on its pad. In January, a full orbital test of the 2-stage version of the rocket, with one Starship upper stage atop a super heavy booster, was scheduled. However, officials must approve the orbital trip after receiving thousands of public opinions. Officials have stated that a decision will be made within weeks. However, greater environmental concerns may cause the company to stop working at Boca Chica completely. Last year, an official document highlighted major issues with the Raptor engines that were supposed to propel Starship. Mr. Musk gave himself a lot of leeway at his news conference. He suggested that an orbital trip may happen in a few months, he said, though it could occur at the end of the year. For almost a decade, SpaceX has been working on something similar to Starship under the names MCT or Mars Colonial Transporter, ITS or Interplanetary Transport System, and BFR, Big Effing Rocket. Earlier versions were even bigger. The ITS carried a payload of 300 tons at one time. All versions, however, had one thing in common. They were created to be completely reusable. SpaceX already uses partially reusable rockets, with the first stages of its Falcon 9 rockets returning to Earth on their own. They can fly again after being reconditioned and refueled, dividing the cost of production across several launches. However, their second stages, which reach far greater altitudes and travel at orbital speeds, are disposable. SpaceX intends to collect both components with Starship. Like the Falcon 9, its super heavy first stage is meant to return to Earth quickly after launch. SpaceX aims to snag it in mid-flight with a pair of robotic chopsticks attached to the launch tower from which it took off. More drama is needed to reclaim the elite tier. The Starship will crash to the ground, losing much of its speed due to atmospheric drag. According to Scott Manley, a scientist and programmer who runs a famous rocketry-focused YouTube channel, it will utilize its short fins for control, rather like how skydivers use their hands and feet. It will turn itself upright, relight some of its engines, and make its own rocket-powered landing when it gets within a few hundred meters of the Earth. This flipping maneuver has already been conducted on several test flights, but not after the descent from orbit. Mr. Musk, whose wild concepts work sometimes and don't, thinks that each super heavy rocket will be ready to launch again in an hour. He expects that because the rocket's upper stages must complete at least one orbit before returning to Earth, they will be able to fly 3 times a day, one day. Starship's Raptor engines are also designed with reusability in mind, says Mr. Manley. They utilize a complex, extremely efficient design developed in the Soviet Union in the 1960s but never flown. They run on methane rather than kerosene, a more regularly used rocket fuel. Methane creates extremely little soot, which aids in keeping the engine's internals clean, another benefit for an engine designed to fly repeatedly. With the assistance of some simple industrial chemistry, both methane and the oxygen required to burn it can be produced from Mars's scant carbon dioxide atmosphere. SpaceX thinks that this will one day allow starships destined for Mars to recharge before returning to Earth. However, Starship's low cost is more than just high-level design considerations. SpaceX's culture is substantially different from that of previous aerospace companies. It is iterative, fast-paced, and startup-like, hence all the crash landings and explosions. If things aren't failing, you aren't inventing enough, Mr. Musk said of his development ethic. In November, he mentioned launching a dozen test flights in 2022 in a lecture to the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. In other areas, such as the Raptor engines, the company combines high-tech, specialized design with a make-do and mend mindset. Space cadets have wished for an affordable, large, reusable rocket for decades. Starship, at least on paper, satisfies it. You nearly get to the point where launch expenses aren't even a factor, Mr. Potter adds. Mr. Musk has stated that he plans to create a fleet of Starships in the future. If they were to launch multiple times a day, SpaceX would send 1 million tons of cargo into orbit each year. According to Bryce Tech, the world will achieve 750 tons in 2021. In time, the satellite business may adjust. In any case, Mr. Musk has stated that because of its low cost, Starship would eventually replace SpaceX's smaller Falcon rockets, which now has a market share of roughly 50%. If he continues his strategy, the first commercial Starship launches may be able to travel with their cargo holds mostly empty. So that is all for today. Hope you learned something new today and wish to stay updated with all the revolutions around the world. If you would like to receive more updates about tech-related news, please like and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for more updates. Thank you for watching.